In the grand scheme of things, UFC President Dana White certainly isn't the hardest person to piss off. In fact, over the years, even some of his most popular superstars have managed to get on his bad side due to their performances inside the octagon. And though not all of these bouts are necessarily boring or uneventful, all 10 were certainly fights that pissed Dana White off. Number 10. George St. Pierre vs. Johnny Hendricks. The year was 2013, and the single greatest fighter in the sport, George St. Pierre, had just managed to edge out a highly controversial decision victory in the toughest fight of his career. A pretty substantial majority of fans had believed that the 170-pound title challenger, Johnny Hendricks, had done enough to get his hand raised in what was a tightly contested but strong performance from Big Rig. However, the biggest shock of the night came when GSP took hold of the mic after the latest defense of his belt and revealed that he would be stepping away from the sport. As you'd expect, Dana White was caught off guard just as much as the rest of us, and when the time came for his post-fight press conference, he proceeded to bash St. Pierre for making such a dramatic decision without informing him. He also made it perfectly clear to those in attendance that he believed Johnny Hendricks had won the fight. It wasn't so much the fact that he had thought GSP had lost, but more so the tone of the entire interview. Dana, to put it simply, was far from happy.
First of all, that decision that happens, right? You don't just say, hey, I'm going to take a while off, maybe I'll be back, maybe I won't. You owe it to the fans, you owe it to that belt, you owe it to this company, and you owe it to Johnny Hendricks to give him that opportunity to fight again.
Number 9. Valentina Shevchenko vs. PRISCILLA Cachoeira. If there's been one constant through Dana White's reign over the UFC, it's his passionate hatred for referees who turn in a bad piece of work or a hugely controversial moment. And when it comes to the veteran ref Mario Yamasaki, the straw that broke the camel's back came in the form of one ugly 125-pound showdown featuring the, at the time, future champion Valentina Shevchenko. PRISCILLA Cachoeira was tasked with the unfortunate job of welcoming the bullet to her optimum fighting weight class, and sure enough, Shevchenko was able to put on one of the most dominant performances you were ever likely to see, battering the Brazilian without any reply on her way to a merciful second-round submission. The problem was that Yamasaki really should have stepped in and stopped the contest earlier. However, in his own words, he wanted to give Cachoeira the chance to be a warrior, something that went completely against his job description. As you would expect, Dana was furious with the referee for his blatant disregard for fighter safety and vowed that he would never be allowed to work in the UFC again.
I think it's disgusting. I think it's disgusting. I think he's disgusting, and I never want to see him reffing ever again.
Number 8. Chuck Liddell vs. Tito Ortiz 3. Though many of us are very used to disagreeing with Dana on a lot of things, no topic brought the MMA world together more than our shared hatred of the third and final showdown between Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell in 2018. Dana, who has long been a friend of Liddell's and a major enemy of Tito's, criticized the event heavily when his other nemesis, Oscar De La Hoya, decided to put these aging legends up against each other. Chuck hadn't competed in 8 years, and at that point in time, had to practically be forced out the door by Dana himself, who told him he simply shouldn't be fighting anymore. Ortiz, who went 0-2 against the Iceman in his prime, celebrated like a madman when he managed to knock out the nearly 50-year-old Liddell, something that clearly angered Dana White hugely, as he went on to make a series of disparaging comments about De La Hoya, Ortiz, and the entire event. All in all, it was an ugly spectacle, and many of the sports fans backed the UFC president up on this one.
And Chuck Liddell's almost 50 years old and has no business fighting anymore. And the fact that the state of California even let that fight happen is disgusting. Disgusting.
Number 7. Dennis Hallman vs. Brian Ebersole. Some fights are boring, some are controversial, but none left quite the same type of impact on Dana White as Dennis Hallman's infamous first-round loss to Brian Ebersole back in 2011. The bout itself, from a competitive standpoint, wasn't anything overly interesting, with Ebersole making quick work of his opponent with some brutal elbows to force the stoppage. What truly stood out there, however, was the somewhat questionable wardrobe choices from Hallman, as he opted to wear a very revealing set of shorts to the octagon, if you could even call them shorts. The fight did not go as planned for Hallman, and his opponent came away with the win, but despite the loss, Hallman's place in history has been sealed, and with that came a hugely memorable post-fight interview with Dana White, calling Hallman's choice of garb disgusting and vowing it would never happen again. Dana more or less put the first nail in the coffin containing Hallman's UFC career there and then. And though he would return for one more fight under his promotional banner, the shorts, as you would expect, did not make an appearance.
That was disgusting. First of all, I'm pissed off that somebody that works for me let him come out with those on, number one. Number two, how, as a corner man, how do you seriously say, dude, this might be a bad idea. You might not want to wear these out there. It was not good. It will never happen again. I can guarantee you that.
Number 6. Stipe Miocic vs. Francis Ngannou 1. To say that Dana White disrespected Stipe Miocic in the lead-up to his potentially record-breaking third defense of his UFC heavyweight title would be putting it lightly. Of course, knowing what we know now, it's funny how Francis Ngannou found himself on the other side of things when it was him who was the promotional darling at the time. Miocic, who had amassed one of the most impressive heavyweight title runs of all time, was left sitting there as Dana gushed over Ngannou's punching power and star potential, cutting a dejected figure during the media events. However, on fight night, Stipe truly showed himself to be great, weathering the Predator's early storm before putting a wrestling clinic on him through 5 rounds to take home the win. When the time came to declare him the victor, Stipe refused to let Dana White put the belt around him, allowing his coach the honor instead. White was obviously quite sour about this and how Ngannou's dreams had been squashed, and in many ways, this planted the seed that would eventually sour their relationship years later.
Francis Ngannou has the world record for the most powerful punch. His punch is the equivalent to 96 horsepower, which is equal to getting hit by a Ford Escort going as fast as it can. And it's more powerful than a 12-pound sledgehammer swung full force from overhead. Holy shit.
Remember, if you're enjoying our content and want to see more, be sure to leave a like before subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Number 5. KHABIB Nurmagomedov vs. Conor McGregor. Although you could see the shock and anger in Dana's eyes as he attempted to explain away KHABIB Nurmagomedov's insane post-fight antics at UFC 229, it was hard not to also think that he was secretly happy about the major exposure that the legendary brawl would bring to his event. UFC 229 was by far and away the biggest selling pay-per-view of all time, and though KHABIB had done enough through his performance to make a statement, a moment of madness directly after his submission victory over Conor McGregor culminated in perhaps the single wildest moment in MMA history. With more eyes on the sport than any other night, fans all over the globe played witness to a moment that likely had the UFC boss in a total panic in the heat of the moment. And while the incident has aged remarkably well, adding to KHABIB's infamy, we're sure that Dana was furious for at least some time after it took place.
Khabib diving over was ridiculous. I mean, you just won a great fight. You fought brilliantly. You're about to get the belt on, and people are going to respect the fact that you fought well and you won the fight. But instead, you dive over the cage and start this huge melee with Conor's corner.
Number 4. TYRON Woodley vs. Stephen Thompson 2. After the hugely popular first matchup between TYRON Woodley and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in the UFC 205 co-main event, their second pairing looked set to be an even bigger spectacle, as the smooth, slick striking stylings of Thompson were put up against the methodical but explosive abilities of the champ Woodley. However, by the time UFC 209 came around, those who stayed up for the main event were left completely and utterly disappointed by one of the most uneventful championship matchups you were ever likely to see. Wonderboy seemed unusually gun-shy in the face of TYRON's dangerous power, and Woodley, in his attempts to freeze Thompson up, was left with his back to the cage, feinting but rarely acting on his movements. In the end, Dana White was pretty furious, but if we're being totally honest, this was just the tip of the iceberg.
You know, Woodley came out and made some big claims before the fight that we would have a definitive answer on who's the champion and things like that. I like TYRON. He just, he's talented. You've heard me say all the things he is before. You can't be upset if people or whatever now after that second fight. I mean, come on.
Number 3. TYRON Woodley vs. DEMIAN. Yes, once again, TYRON Woodley makes an appearance, this time in the showdown that really angered Dana White, his welterweight title defense against the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master DEMIAN. And in fairness to TYRON, Maia really didn't help his cause, opting to fight a wrestling-heavy game plan that saw him left powerless in the face of Woodley's excellent takedown defense. The bout, in the end, boiled down to Maia not wanting to engage TYRON unless he was shooting for his legs, and TYRON not wanting to engage Maia just in case he got a hold of his legs. All in all, as much it was an impressive display of anti-wrestling from the champ, Woodley's overly tactical approach didn't earn him any fans, even if it got him the win. Dana, who generally does not like this style of matchup, especially in a 5-round title defense, once again criticized Woodley for not pressing the action. This would mark the highest point of the feud that existed between White and Woodley. And though the chosen one would earn some notoriety in his follow-up with Darren Till, his relationship with the promotion would never be the same.
They broke the record for the least punches ever thrown in a title fight. There's not much to be pleased with or to talk about. I mean, what really is there to talk about in that fight?
Number 2. Anderson Silva vs. Demian Maia. Next up, we have a second appearance for Demian Maia, this time opposite Anderson Silva for a matchup that has to be considered among the oddest in UFC history. With the promotion having booked themselves in for a potentially huge event in Abu Dhabi, the pressure was on Dana to produce the goods and stack the card with some of his best talents. Anderson Silva, the electric middleweight champion, was the fighter to get the call, and with an opponent in front of him who posed literally no striking threat, the stage seemed set for a classic Silva finish. However, the fight did not play out like that at all, and the longer it went on, the less interested Silva seemed in directly confronting Maia and his takedown threat. In the end, it was a highly boring affair that left the UFC president with some choice words for the spider. Even to this day, this bout is cited among the strangest in UFC history, and if you ever get the chance to watch it, you'll understand why.
So while they're getting these guys in, believe me, I'll answer the questions of what a disgrace the main event was and what an embarrassment it is. I don't think I've ever been more embarrassed in the 10 years of being in this business. And it's the first time that I've ever walked out on a main event and given the belt to the guy's manager and told him to put it on him.
Number 1. Francis Ngannou versus Ciryl Gane. And finally, we come to the most recent entry on our list. You all probably know the story. Francis Ngannou's title-winning performance against Stipe Miocic gave away some major tension between his team and the UFC, with Dana going as far as to create the interim championship just a few months after the Predator had successfully earned UFC gold. With Ciryl Gane pegged by the promotion as the most likely fighter to dethrone him, they even made every attempt to rattle Ngannou and not pay him what he felt he deserved, leading to a hugely public contract dispute. Francis, in a shocking display of triumph, managed to defeat Gane on the scorecards using a heavily wrestling-based approach. Dana was so angry afterwards that he left the arena without putting the belt on Ngannou and opted out of his post-fight press conference. Crazy drama indeed. And that will just about do it for this video. Again, if you enjoyed today's video and want to see more, be sure to leave a like and a comment before subscribing to the channel so you can stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. Thanks for watching.